are you expecting, and this is important for your business too, Erica, notions of identity to change over time?
That depends on a lot of things. I mean, you spoke to Latinos who've been here for 10 generations, and you've had Latinos who have come to this country as citizens, as you have Puerto Ricans, and for example, and many of these groups and individuals are still treated as an other, as not fully American, whatever that means. So until you talked about the projections and everything, and one of the hopes and the aspiration is that the Latino experience will be seen as a universal experience for what it is, and that the bar is not always a privileged white male bar to measure everything else against, that we're interwoven and integrated, and that we bring to this country what everyone else brings to this country. But what I see with the next generation, the whole bridge generation, there's always a bridge generation, is, and it depends on the context, of course, is this interest and this respect and this validity of our culture, and that's because a lot of the icons are shifting in popular culture. For example, Mark Sanchez is a star quarterback. You have folks like Carmelo Anthony, who's half Puerto Rican, who's being hotly debated, and all of these figures and the foods and the music that you listen to that are really apparent in ways that for our generations it wasn't. So it's becoming sort of like a standard, a main standard, not only for Latinos but for a range of Americans. So I can't predict what the future will hold, but I think that I can't predict the future, but I think that the next generation and kids that are growing up are really respectful of their culture and interested in what's happening with their community and with all these political debates that are happening, even more so actually, even if they're not immigrants or don't have a first-hand immigrant experience.
The last big period of assimilation, Mark, we didn't have the Voting Rights Act. So what you take into account when you define a community of interest may be different the next time around. You alluded to this in the last segment.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that the Voting Rights Act, when it was originally enacted, was focused mainly at the southern states. It was mainly at black-white issues, African-American, white Caucasian issues, and the suppression of the black community, basically going all the way back to the end of Reconstruction in the South. But the Latino community was brought in, and it has some of the same issues, but the Latino communities are very different and more diverse politically. So I think it's a much more complicated issue. I think going forward, I mean, the society of both, the Hispanic communities affect the broader society in many ways. It's just not simply the notion that the Hispanic community is somehow going to become more homogenized and more part of the overall American society. The Hispanic community changes the American society and will in many ways. Again, I think the Hispanic community, more clearly maybe than the black community, is likely to, going forward, look very much like the rest of society by 10 years from now in the sense of political. I see already the Hispanic communities are more diverse politically than the black communities, and I expect that diversion. I expect the Hispanic vote in the different communities to be hotly contested by both parties for the simple reason neither of them can exist as a majority. Neither can they elect candidates on a regular basis nationwide without getting a significant portion of those people who identify themselves as Hispanic.
What do you think, Bruce Kane? Do you agree with that analysis?
Yeah, but I'm going to raise some notes of caution here. I think the historical analogies are probably partially right, and I think they're encouraging. But let's talk about some differences in the modern times that could be problematic. First of all, the Italians didn't have the undocumented immigration issue the way the Latinos do. And we've seen what that's done to states like Arizona. And I think we have to see that even if you look at the election of Obama, you see that some states actually went more against Obama than they did against Kerry. So I think race relations in this country is highly contextualized, partly because the population's so mobile that people tend to move in with other people like themselves. Their media is much more fractionalized. And there is a real nativist reaction in certain parts of the United States to the undocumented part of the Latino growth. And it's not obvious to me that I think we'll eventually get to the point that we're talking about where it looks more like the analogy with the Italians. But I think in the short run, it could be a rough period, particularly since a lot of this growth that we've been talking about has gone into areas where there wasn't a long historical experience with the Latino community, like there was in California, like there was in Texas, like there was in New Mexico. What you're doing is you're moving into areas where there was actually racial tension between blacks and whites. And all of a sudden now you have a Latino community. They're branded in the eyes of some whites as being illegal and lawbreakers. And we've seen that every debate we've had about immigration has been highly tense. I think that that's not going to go away right away.
You know, if you look at the Southeast, with the exception of Florida and Louisiana, there wasn't much experience with immigration, period. They were the most uniformly native-born places in the country for almost all of our history. So, yeah, it's a good point, Professor.